What would you do if the person who broke your heart 10 years ago suddenly held your life in their hands? What if the love you thought was dead turned out to be the one thing keeping you alive? Stay until the end, because what happens in that hospital room will change everything you believe about second chances. And trust me, the twist at the very end? You'll never see it coming. Before we dive in, if stories about love, redemption, and fate speak to your heart, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that might just change your perspective on life. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The story begins. Marcus Chen had everything money could buy. At 42 years old, he had built an empire from nothing, transforming a small tech startup in his garage into a billion-dollar company that employed thousands of people across 3 continents. His face graced the covers of business magazines. His name was whispered in boardrooms with a mixture of respect and envy. His penthouse overlooked the glittering skyline of Manhattan, and his garage housed cars that most people only dreamed about. But on this particular Tuesday morning, as Marcus sat in his corner office watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber, he felt something he hadn't acknowledged in years. Emptiness. The kind that no amount of money could fill. The kind that crept in during quiet moments and reminded him that success, without someone to share it with, was just loneliness wearing a designer suit. His assistant, Rebecca, knocked twice before entering. She had been with him for 15 years, and she was perhaps the only person who truly understood the man behind the billionaire mask. "Mr. Chen, your annual physical is scheduled for this afternoon." Dr. Patterson's office called to confirm. Marcus nodded without looking up. He had been avoiding this appointment for months. Not because he was afraid of doctors, but because lately, his body had been sending him warnings he couldn't ignore. The persistent fatigue. The occasional chest tightness. The way he sometimes lost his breath climbing a single flight of stairs. At 42, he was supposed to be in his prime. Instead, he felt like a machine running on borrowed time. "I'll be there," he said quietly. What Marcus didn't know was that Dr. Patterson had retired unexpectedly the previous week due to a family emergency. What he didn't know was that the universe had been waiting 10 years to bring 2 paths back together. What he didn't know was that his life was about to change in ways no amount of money could have prepared him for. The medical center was one of the most prestigious in the city, the kind of place where discretion was guaranteed and privacy was worth its weight in gold. Marcus arrived in his black Bentley, accompanied only by his driver. He had dismissed his usual security detail, wanting to feel normal for just one afternoon. The waiting room was elegant but sterile, filled with other wealthy patients who pretended not to recognize each other. Marcus checked in at the front desk, gave his insurance information that he didn't actually need, and settled into a leather chair to wait. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Marcus was growing impatient, checking his phone, answering emails, trying to distract himself from the growing anxiety in his chest. Finally, a nurse appeared at the door. "Mr. Chen? The doctor will see you now." He followed her down a long corridor, past examination rooms with closed doors and the distant sound of medical equipment beeping. The nurse stopped outside room 7, smiled politely, and gestured for him to enter. "The doctor will be with you shortly. Please change into the gown provided." Marcus did as instructed, feeling vulnerable in a way that billions of dollars couldn't protect him from. He sat on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath him, and stared at the diplomas on the wall. Harvard Medical School. Johns Hopkins Residency. Fellowship at Mayo Clinic. Whoever this doctor was, they were clearly accomplished. Then the door opened. And Marcus Chen's world stopped spinning. Standing in the doorway, wearing a white coat with a stethoscope around her neck, was Sofia Rivera. The woman he had loved with every fiber of his being. The woman he had let go. The woman who had haunted his dreams for 10 long years. She looked up from the chart in her hands, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them could speak. Sophia had imagined this moment 1,000 times. In her fantasies, she had always been composed, professional, unmoved by the sight of the man who had shattered her heart. In reality, she felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Marcus, she breathed, his name escaping before she could stop it. He looked older now, distinguished in a way that only made him more handsome. Silver streaked his temples, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But those eyes, dark and deep and impossibly intense, were exactly the same. They were the eyes she had fallen in love with in that tiny coffee shop near campus, the eyes that had looked at her like she was the only person in the world, the eyes that had been filled with pain the last time she saw them. Sophia. His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know. I thought. Dr. Patterson retired, she managed to say, forcing herself into professional mode. I'm covering his patients temporarily. The silence that followed was deafening. She should transfer him to another doctor. That would be the ethical thing to do. The safe thing. But something kept her frozen in place, something that had nothing to do with medical protocol and everything to do with unfinished business that had waited a decade to be resolved. Should I request someone else? Marcus asked, reading her hesitation. Sophia took a deep breath. She was a professional. She had spent 15 years building a career, saving lives, proving that she was more than the heartbroken girl Marcus had left behind. She could handle this. That won't be necessary, she said, her voice steadier now. I'm your doctor today. Let's proceed with the examination. The next hour was the most surreal experience of Marcus's life. Sophia checked his blood pressure, listened to his heart, asked questions about his lifestyle and symptoms with clinical detachment. But beneath the professionalism, he could see her hands trembling slightly. He noticed the way she avoided direct eye contact. He caught the subtle catch in her breath when her fingers accidentally brushed against his skin. A decade of memories flooded back. The way they had met in that coffee shop, both reaching for the same cup by mistake. Their first date at a tiny Italian restaurant where they had talked until the owners politely kicked them out at closing time. The night he had told her about his dreams of building something that would change the world, and she had looked at him with absolute faith and said, "You will. I know you will." The night everything fell apart. Marcus. Sophia's voice pulled him back to the present. Her expression had changed, the professional mask slipping to reveal something that looked like concern. Real concern. Your blood pressure is extremely elevated. Your heart rhythm is irregular. When did you last have a comprehensive cardiac workup? He shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned. A few years ago, maybe. I've been busy. Too busy to take care of your health. There was an edge to her voice now, something that sounded almost like anger. You're showing multiple warning signs of serious cardiovascular stress. I'm ordering a full cardiac panel immediately. And I want you to have an echocardiogram before you leave this building. Is it that serious? Sophia looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the walls she had built start to crack. I don't know yet. But I'm not willing to take any chances. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in Sophia's office, waiting for the results. The room was filled with personal touches that told the story of her life since he had left. Photographs of her receiving awards. A picture of her with a group of children at what looked like a free clinic. A small plant on her desk, thriving and green. Evidence of a life well lived, a life that had continued and flourished without him. She entered carrying a folder, her expression grave. The results are in, she said, sitting down across from him. Marcus, you have significant blockage in 2 of your coronary arteries. Your heart has been working overtime for years, probably due to stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, and... She hesitated. And likely emotional factors as well. He absorbed the information in silence. Part of him wasn't even surprised. He had been running himself into the ground for a decade, using work as a way to avoid dealing with everything he had lost. What are my options? You need surgery. Angioplasty with stent placement, at minimum. And you need to make serious lifestyle changes. Otherwise. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. How long do I have? Before the surgery, I mean. We should schedule it within the next 2 weeks. Any longer, and you're risking a major cardiac event. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. You could have died, Marcus. If you had ignored this much longer, if you had kept pushing yourself the way you have been. I might have been reading about you in an obituary instead of treating you in an exam room. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. But it wasn't the medical reality that affected him most. It was the way her voice cracked at the end. It was the way her eyes glistened with unshed tears. After everything, after 10 years of silence, she still cared whether he lived or died. Why did you leave me, Sophia? The question came out before he could stop it, hanging in the air between them like a ghost that had waited too long to be acknowledged. Sophia stood abruptly, turning to face the window so he wouldn't see her tears. You left me, Marcus. Not the other way around. That's not true. I came back for you. I came back, and you were gone. Your apartment was empty. Your phone was disconnected. It was like you had vanished from the face of the earth. She spun around, her eyes blazing. You came back? When? After you chose your company over our relationship? After you stood me up on what was supposed to be our wedding day? After you sent your assistant, to tell me that you couldn't make it because an investor meeting was more important than marrying me? The words hit Marcus like physical blows. What are you talking about? I never sent Rebecca to tell you anything. I was at the church. I waited for 3 hours. You never showed up. That's impossible. Sophia's voice was shaking now. She came to my apartment that morning. She said you had decided you weren't ready. She said the company needed your full attention and that marriage would be a distraction. She gave me a check for $100,000 and told me it was enough to start over somewhere else. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Rebecca told you that? She was very convincing. She said she was delivering a message straight from you. And then when I went to confront you, your security wouldn't let me into the building. They said you had given explicit instructions not to let me in. For a long moment, Marcus couldn't breathe. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a picture so devastating that he could barely comprehend it. Rebecca. His trusted assistant. The woman who had been with him for 15 years. The woman who had organized his wedding, who had known every detail of his schedule, who had always been there with a sympathetic ear when he wondered why Sophia had abandoned him. I never gave those instructions, he said slowly. I never sent that message. I never wrote that check. Sophia, I swear to you on everything I have ever built, I was at that church waiting for you. When you didn't come, I thought you had changed your mind. I thought you didn't want me. The silence that followed was the loudest sound either of them had ever heard. That evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse with a glass of whiskey he wasn't supposed to drink and a heart that was broken in ways no surgery could fix. He had confronted Rebecca, who had broken down in tears and confessed everything. She had been in love with him for years, she admitted. She had watched him plan his wedding, watched him light up at the mention of Sophia's name, and something inside her had snapped. She had convinced herself that Sophia wasn't right for him, that she was only after his money, that he would eventually realize Rebecca was the one who truly understood him. So she had intercepted communications. Forged instructions. Written that check from a company account. Created an elaborate web of lies that had destroyed 2 lives. Marcus had fired her on the spot, but it felt hollow. What did justice mean when 10 years had been stolen? What did punishment matter when the damage was already done? His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I need time to process everything. But I think we need to talk. Really talk. Not as doctor and patient. As Sophia and Marcus. Will you meet me tomorrow? He typed back a single word, yes. They met at a small park near the hospital, a quiet green space where doctors sometimes came to decompress between shifts. Sophia was already there when Marcus arrived, sitting on a bench beneath an old oak tree, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. He sat down beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. I couldn't sleep last night, she said without preamble. I kept thinking about all those years. All that time I spent hating you, resenting you, using your memory as motivation to prove I didn't need you. And now I find out it was all based on a lie. I couldn't sleep either. I kept thinking about what might have been. If she hadn't interfered. If we had gotten married that day. We could have had 10 years together. We could have had everything, Sophia finished quietly. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching children play on a nearby playground, watching couples walk hand in hand along the path, watching life continue around them while they grappled with a past that had been rewritten overnight. I need to tell you something, Sophia finally said. Something I've never told anyone. Marcus turned to look at her, and he saw a pain in her eyes that went beyond what he had expected. When Rebecca came to me that day, when she told me you weren't coming, I was pregnant, Marcus. We were going to have a baby. The world tilted on its axis. The stress of everything that happened, the heartbreak, the shock, the feeling that my entire future had been ripped away. I lost the baby 2 weeks later. The doctors said it was a combination of factors, but I always knew. I knew it was because my heart was too broken to sustain new life. Tears were streaming down her face now, and Marcus felt his own eyes burning. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. I am so sorry, he whispered, the words completely inadequate but the only ones he had. I am so incredibly sorry. You didn't know. How could you have known? We were both victims of the same lie. They held hands and cried together, grieving for the child they never had, for the life they never built, for the decade of love and partnership that had been stolen from them. Over the following days, as Marcus prepared for his surgery, he and Sophia began the slow, painful process of rebuilding what had been destroyed. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps of the last 10 years. She told him about medical school, about her residency, about the free clinic she had founded that provided care to underprivileged communities. He told her about building his company, about the empty penthouses and meaningless acquisitions, about the way success had become a prison rather than a freedom. I never stopped loving you, he admitted one evening, as they walked along the river near her apartment. I tried. God knows I tried. I dated other women, convinced myself I was over you. But every time I looked at them, all I could see was how they weren't you. I told myself I hated you, Sophia replied. For years, I used that hatred to fuel everything I did. I became a doctor partly to prove I was better off without you. But hate and love are two sides of the same coin, aren't they? You can't hate someone that deeply unless you love them that deeply first. The night before his surgery, Marcus sat in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, someone was going to cut open his chest and repair his heart. The irony wasn't lost on him. His physical heart had been failing for years because his emotional heart had been shattered a decade ago. Sophia came to see him after her shift ended, still in her scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted and beautiful and like everything he had ever wanted. I'll be in the observation room tomorrow, she said, sitting on the edge of his bed. I can't operate on you, for obvious reasons, but I made sure the best cardiac surgeon in the state is handling your case. Dr. Williams. He trained at the same program I did. His hands are steady as stone. Are you worried? Terrified, she admitted. I just found out that the last 10 years were based on a lie. I just found out that the man I thought abandoned me actually waited for me at the altar. I'm not ready to lose you again, Marcus. Not when we've barely started to find our way back." He reached up and touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her cheek, the place where her tears had fallen. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "I have too much to live for now." The surgery lasted 4 hours. 4 hours during which Sophia sat in the observation room, watching through the glass, barely breathing as Dr. Williams worked to repair the damage that years of stress and heartbreak had caused. When it was over, when the monitors showed steady rhythms and the surgeons began closing, Sophia finally let herself exhale. She went to the chapel on the 3rd floor, a place she hadn't visited in years, and she prayed. Not to any specific God, but to the universe that had brought them back together. She prayed for second chances. She prayed for time. She prayed for the opportunity to love Marcus Chen the way she should have been able to love him all along. Marcus woke to the sound of beeping monitors and the smell of antiseptic and the sight of Sophia asleep in the chair beside his bed. Her hand was wrapped around his, and even in sleep, she held on tight, as if afraid he might disappear again. He watched her for a long time, memorizing the details of her face, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath, the small smile that played at the corners of her lips even in dreams. This was what wealth really looked like, he realized. Not buildings or bank accounts or business empires. This. A hand to hold. Someone who stayed. Someone who cared whether you lived or died. When Sophia finally stirred, blinking awake in the harsh hospital light, the first thing she saw was Marcus watching her with tears streaming down his face. "Hey," she whispered. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been given a second chance at life," he said. "And I don't intend to waste it."